Flurry here. I'm here to do my second part of my April reading wrap up. So in this video, at the time of this recording, which is on the April 25th, so it's like the Saturday before the end of the month. Still have a week to go, so this is probably going to be filmed in two parts. Like I'm going to do my reading, all the books I read up until this point, and then I'll do a couple on Saturday, and then I'll post this on Sunday. But right now I have read 7 books for you guys, and I'll probably have a couple more at the end of the week, especially listening-wise, because I am working from home and I have a lot of listening hours on my hand, at least most of the time. But the first book I want to chat through is the second book that I finished reading for the stay-at-home reading rush, and that is Once Upon a Dream by Liz Brashwell, which is a twisted tale, and this is the Sleeping Beauty one. And it basically asks the question, what if Sleeping Beauty never woke up? What happens if Prince Philip's kiss never woke her up and she was trapped in her nightmares? This book I loved. I flew through this. This one was like close to 400 and like 450 pages. I loved it. I thought it was so well done. I really liked how it explored that question. The world building they did was so good, but the one thing I loved about this book was it really delved into the relationship between Philip and Aurora, and you really learned a lot about those characters, especially Aurora, but also a lot about Philip. I just was so entranced by this. I definitely have added all of the twisted tales to my TBR, and I think we're going to choose one for the Time Warp YA book club to read, and I am also, one of my next reads is going to be the Mulan one. This is also a story that like I wasn't super familiar with, so I think for the first like 20 to 30 pages of this, I was a little bit confused about what was actually happening. But once I got past that part, I loved it. I loved how we really dived into Aurora's character. I loved how it really explored Prince Philip and her relationship. And I just loved it. I thought it was so great. And I definitely am going to read the rest of the books in the series because I think that it can do what the movies never could, really give the female characters a voice. I read one other one. I read Part of Your World, which is one that I really loved, and I have the same comments. I think that it really expanded Ariel and Eric's relationship, but also it gave a lot of side characters a little bit more of like a moment. So I wound up giving this one 4 stars, and it definitely inspired me to read the other ones. And this definitely made my favorite books of the month list by far. And also at the tail end of the reading rush, I picked up Verona Comics by Jennifer Dugan, and I really struggled with Hot Dog Girl last year. I actually read it in May of last year, and I didn't love it. I liked it. I didn't love it. I felt like really unconnected to the characters. I didn't like the characters. This book, however, I loved. I loved it from page 1 to the end page. I thought this book was so fun. It basically follows these 2 characters, Jubilee and Ridley, and they are basically star-crossed lovers in the comic book world. Jubilee's parents own a little indie comic book shop, and Ridley's dad owns a big time, like one of like the biggest comic book chains in the world. I guess they're like, like Dark Horse or something. I guess you could say it like that. And these 2 characters wind up finding themselves together at like a comic book convention, and their paths wind up crossing, and it's just their relationship as it develops. It also has a lot of elements of like anxiety and depression and codependency and relationship. Wind up loving this book. I love that it was a dual point of view story. I love how we really got to dive into Ridley and Jubilee's head, and I loved it. I thought it was so well done, and I may have cried at the end. But if you're looking for kind of a more an emotional fandom novel, which I love Geekerella, I love all the other fandom books that I read, this book is definitely one that I'm going to be keeping. Like, definitely going to be reading again. I really, really loved it, and I hope that Jennifer Dugan writes more books set in the specific worlds because I thought it was so much fun. And really, if you guys are like looking, if you're like English teachers and you're kind of looking for a book that kind of explores the Romeo and Juliet myth, I would really use this one. I found it really, really fun, and it also dealt with harder topics. And I said this in my reading vlog, and I don't think like I articulated it as well as I should have. I liked how she used her words, like, and how she wrote her story to really get into Ridley's head, and like she like had stuff like like she italicized some stuff, and I just really, really liked that. I love their relationship, and it was just a really, really fun read. So this one was like a 5-star read for me by far. One of my favorite books of the month by far. These 2 are actually pretty strong, and I read them very, very close together and back to back, and like so well done. And then the next book I read is another one that I want to picking up, and this is from DC Comics. I also picked this one up at ALA, and this is Xantea and the House of Secrets. This, I think, came out. Oh, this one came out in like February, I think. But this follows a girl named Zentia, and it's like the night of Halloween, and she realizes that her dad is a magician, but then she realizes her house may not be what she expects, and she kind of has to go on an adventure to find her dad in her house, and there's vampires involved or like monsters involved. I found it to be super fun. There's like a little bunny as like a character. I loved it. I thought it was so cute. I wound up giving it 4 stars. This is not like the best example, but I'll read the back for you. Welcome to the magical, mystical, topsy-turvy world of the House of Secrets, where Zentia embarks on a journey of self-discovery and adventure with her pet Pocus at her side. And I just love the art style in this book. I love the cast of characters that we got. And I was just really fond of it. I have been loving all the DC imprint graphic novels that I have been reading. And this one was just super cute. And I love books that have animals as sidekicks, so it was great. And then the next book I read, I'm actually so happy about. I actually finished reading Ghosts of the Shadow Market by Cassandra Clare, Cyrus Brennan, Maureen Johnson, Kelly Link, and Robin Wasserman. This is a collection of short stories that follow Jem throughout not only different shadow markets, but also throughout different like time frames of history as he's looking for something. And it really was such a joy to read. Some of my lingering questions got answered. I got to see all of my favorite characters. It was also a nice startup for Chain of Gold, which I hope to read in May. And I just really liked it. I thought it was a 5-star read. Some stories honestly I enjoyed more than the others. I definitely loved the last half of the stories in this, but I feel like once I read Chain of Gold, I feel like I'll be just as emotionally invested in the other characters in this. But I love Jen as the through line. I love seeing Kit and Kit and those characters from the Dark Artifices series again. And it was just such a fun read. And this was a listen for me. I actually wound up listening to this. And then the last audiobook that as the time of recording I finished was All Your Twisted Secrets by Diana Urban. Said this throughout this whole quarantine process that I've been struggling to find things that I could like listen to like as I'm working because I'm teaching, but like I'm just like basically like talking to the kids and I'm correcting work basically, but I need something as background noise. So I ended up picking up this book. I actually heard about it from my friend Jen and then from Haley in Bookland. It's basically this thriller where these all kids are invited to like a dinner, but then they're kind of like locked in here and they're left with a bomb and a needle and say that the only way you're all gonna get out of this room alive is if you kill one of the other people. I will admit, I went into this book like kind of intrigued. By the end, I was shocked and surprised, and I thought it was a really interesting way to craft a story. I said this in my reading vlog, which will probably be posted way after this, but I struggle to feel connected to the characters. We basically follow one character, Amber, and you follow her in the past and in the present because you see all the moments leading up to this stuff, and then you see in the present like what's happening. So it's like eventually like the timelines kind of connect. But other than her, I didn't feel as connected to the other characters, and I kind of wish we had been in their heads a little bit. It does make sense why we weren't, but I felt like the twist was really well executed, and I like the pacing of the story. I like the present and the past. I thought it dealt with a lot of like interesting topics as well, like bullying. Bullying was a very big deal in this story, and I actually really did like her take on it. I would definitely read more by this author in the future. I thought that she was a very solid storyteller, and once I saw the twist, I was like, oh, I hope it doesn't go the way that another book I read with a very similar twist happened. I hope it doesn't go that way, and it didn't. So I was actually really happy about that. And then the last book that I finished at the time of this filming, which I just finished last night, was The Time Warp YA Book Club, which was Onyx and Ivy by Mindy Arnett. I have to admit, this book did not wow me. The group chose it. I did have it. I got it from Book Outlet a couple of years ago. I will admit, I did like it. I like the world building. I like the characters, but I struggled with the pacing. I think this book was really long, and I think I wasn't as captivated about the story and what was happening, but I like the characters. I thought the world building was super interesting. Basically, you follow this character named Kate, and she is known as a traitor, has Traitor Kate because her dad is the one that tried to kill the king, and she also has magic that no one knows about because magic in the society is very bad. And then the other point of view you follow is the king's son Corwin, and they were best friends when they were younger. So you kind of have a flashback relationship and like a rekindling in the present. And then there's some mysteries that are kind of unraveling throughout this whole story, and I just wasn't as connected to the storyline as I wanted to be. But I will probably check out book 2. I really did like the side characters, and I thought that the world was super interesting. I just wasn't as connected to what was happening in the story, and I only wound up giving this book 3 stars. So the next time you see me, it's going to be the end of the month, and I'm going to have all the rest of the books that I read. So now you're going to see that clip. Story here. It is May 2nd, and I'm here to wrap up my reading wrap up for the month of April. So I actually did something a little bit unique this week, the last week of April. I wound up making like a themed reading week, and I think I'm going to try to do these going forward until we're kind of like out of quarantine for the foreseeable future, because I kind of like that. So I chose to focus on historical reads, like historical fiction or historical romances for this week, and actually was pretty successful. So the first thing I finished listening to was Coldhearted Rake by Lisa Kleypas. This is the first ever historical fiction romance book that I've ever read, but I was motivated to pick it up because of Alexa Loves Books, and also because I needed something to listen to that I like literally could just listen to and not have to focus a lot on picking this up. So it follows these 2 characters, and I cannot remember the girl's name for the life of me, but it follows these 2 characters. It's a dual perspective romance novel, which if you followed me in my contemporary genres, I love those reads like so much. I love like dual perspectives. So you basically follow these 2 characters, and the female character, her husband, which she's been married to for like 5 days, died, and she is basically put in the control of like her husband's cousin, I guess. And he kind of comes, and he's kind of discerned that he's going to like basically either sell this house or kind of keep it. And she's also living in this house is 3 other girls, which is her husband's sisters. I know it's a little bit confusing, but it'll make sense in the read. So these characters kind of wind up butting head. It's definitely love to hate, I'll say that. I mean, hate to love, but I wound up loving this book. I love the setting, I love the world, I love the characters. I thought it was such a fun read. I will say, it is sexy. Like, it is very, very steamy. Like, there's a lot of sex scenes, which is so not the thing for that time period, but I found up really, really liking it. I wound up giving it like a 4 stars. We'll definitely read more in the series. I have to try to hunt them down because I don't want to use my Audible credits if I could avoid it. So I'm trying to see if there's some on Audible, on Hoopla. So I'm kind of in the middle of that, but I might just buy the bullet and buy them straight out. We will see. But I wound up really liking that book, and I was not expecting to like that one. So the next physical book I picked up was the Enigma Game by Elizabeth Wen. I did a whole reading blog about this. You'll see my thoughts before that goes up. But this is actually a historical fiction book set in the 1940s. She does have a lot of other books. She has Codename Verity. She has The Pearl Thief. She has a couple of Rose Under Fire. She has a bunch of other books. And I know that if you read this without reading it, it will be an enjoyable read. But I do recommend reading her books in publication order because there are characters in Codename Verity and The Pearl Thief that appear in this. And I just think you would appreciate it a little more. I think I would have appreciated it a little bit more. If you followed me for a while, you know I sometimes struggle with like large epic fantasy battles because I kind of get lost in the details. There was a big point of view in this that was about fighting an actual war, and I think that was what kind of took me out of the story a little bit. But it basically follows these 3 characters, Ellen, Jamie, and Louisa, and their paths wind up crossing in the 1940s, and they're dealing with like a cipher machine that kind of comes into their midst. And I wound up loving the spycraft element. I love how this book tackled like diversity and prejudices in such different ways. I thought the spycraft elements were super unique, and I definitely want to dive into her other reads because the characters that we met in this book have their own books, and I really want to hear their story afterwards. This is kind of a prequel to one of them. It's a prequel to Codename Verity, and then it's a sequel to The Pearl Thief. So kind of going off of that, but I wound up liking it. I didn't love it. I think the elements of war, physical war, took me out of the story a little bit, and you'll see in my other books I like them a little bit more because that element didn't really exist. But I still wound up giving it like 3.5, 4 stars, and thoroughly enjoyed it. And I would definitely read more by this author in the future. And then the next book I picked up was one that I just kind of picked up because I thought I could finish it. Is Words on Fire by Jennifer A. Nielsen. I have read nothing by this author. She has a bunch of fantasy books. She has a lot of historical fiction books that I have quickly added to my TBR. This book follows a young girl named Audra. It is set in Lithuania. I always forget the date. Let's see. It's in 1893. So this is when Lithuania is being controlled by the Russians. And you follow this young girl named Audra. The book starts off, she's living with her parents, kind of isolated. But her parents are taken by the Russians for a very, very reason that she learns later. Basically, her family is involved in the resistance movements and are very involved in book smuggling because in this time period, Lithuanians could not have access to books that represented their culture because the Russians wanted to stamp it out of them. So she winds up getting roped up into this book smuggling operation, and it was so captivating. Like, I read this book in like 2 days. I could not wait to read it. It also is a standalone. There is a little bit of again, this also dealt with like prejudices and racism, and it was a smaller story in a bigger war. There was some reveals at the end that like shocked me. I was like, oh my goodness, I did not see that coming. I would definitely re-listen to this book in the future, because I'm actually going to give this to one of my students because she likes historical fiction a lot. But the highlight of this book, the highlight of it was definitely the discussion of what books could mean to someone and the discussion of, words becoming a resistance tool, and I love that. I thought this book was so good, and it was a solid standalone with the beginning, middle, and end. I love learning more about a time period and a group of people that I knew nothing about. So again, very, very strong read. 4.5 stars. I wish the ending would have been a little bit fleshed out a little bit more, and maybe a little bit more hints or tricks about the reveals throughout it, but otherwise, very, very strong read, and I'm definitely going to check out more historical fiction books in the future. Now, this book I actually finished May 1st, but I just wanted to tag it into this video because I did read it mostly in that week, and that is Blackbird Girls by Anne Blankman. This is a book that I got from ALA, and I wound up listening to it, but this follows three point of views, but you get 2 of the point of views most of the time, and this takes place, let me get the year right, 1986, in the aftermath of the Chernobyl power plant disaster. So you basically follow 2 characters, Askana and Valentina. There is another point of view, but I don't want to spoil that too much because it is definitely a reveal. And their fathers were working in the power plant when that incident happened, and it's kind of dealing with them in the aftermath of that. And these girls don't like each other at the start of the book, but oh my god, it was such a heartwarming story. I loved it. I cried at the end. I thought it was so good. This book focuses on friendship, racism and prejudice again, but also resistance, finding your resistance moments, and just really, really strong found family elements. This book also had a found family element as well, but I just loved it. I was so captivated from page 1 about these young girls, and I love the point of views. The only thing that I was like a little bit confused about, and probably because I was listening to it, was who at the very, very start of it. But I just love the girls' dynamics. They went on they changed locations a lot in this book, and I think you dived into both their paths a lot. Really, really, really wound up loving it, and I will definitely check more by this author out in the future. I don't even know if this was her first book that she read, but I loved it. So guys, that's just all the books that I wound up reading for the month of April. This is the second half. I think all together, I read I don't even know. I read a lot of books, I'll say that. I think this was like my biggest reading month to date because I was home so much, got a lot of listening done. But let me know in the comments what are some books that you tackled this month and what are some of your highlights. For me, I would say Verona Comics is still a standout. Ghosts of the Shadow Market is still a standout. And honestly, these 2 were really, really standouts too. Words on Fire and Blackbird Girls. So those were kind of the books that really stood out to me. And I'm excited to have another reading wrap up for you at the end of May. I hope you guys are staying safe and being well, and I'll talk to you guys soon. Bye.